The most valuable investment ever made was to give a plate of rice
Please,
to a mad
just
woman
try
on the
and
streets
eat
of Port
something.
Harcourt.
I
And
beg
how this
you.
mad woman gave birth to a billion-dollar company in return
Help me.
is a shocking
Adana,
story
don't worry,
that will
help is
change
coming.
how you see kindness
We need to
forever.
get.
Grab your popcorn, sit down, and let's
We are
enjoy
so
this
proud of you,
incredible
son.
African tale together because what you're about to
This
discover
house
will
is a
blow your mind.
testament to your
In the
hard
busy,
work.
noisy street of Port Harcourt, Nigeria, where car horns never stop honking and people rush around trying to make money, everyone laughed and pointed at a crazy woman who wandered around talking to invisible friends, collecting small stones like they were precious diamonds, and sometimes screaming at the sky for no reason anyone could understand. Children would throw rocks at her, adults would cross the street to avoid her smell, and everyone called her the Mad Woman of Garrison Junction, like she was some kind of scary monster in a horror movie. But here's the shocking truth nobody knew. This woman had a secret so amazing that it would one day make her family richer than kings and queens. Her real name was Adana, which means father's daughter in her language, and before she became the woman everyone feared and mocked, she was the smartest person anyone had ever met. She graduated from university with the highest grades in petroleum engineering. Her parents were so proud they threw the biggest party their neighborhood had ever seen, and she was engaged to marry a wonderful man who loved her more than the moon loves the stars. Picture this: Adana had everything: beauty that made flowers jealous, brains that could solve any problem, a loving family, and a future so bright it could light up the whole city. She would laugh so hard and so beautifully that even the big trees seemed to dance when they heard her voice. And when she walked down the street, people would stop what they were doing just to watch her pass by because she glowed with happiness and success. But then, in one terrible moment that lasted only a few seconds but changed everything forever, her perfect world exploded into a million pieces like a glass cup dropping on concrete. It was a sunny afternoon on the dangerous east-west road, and Adana was riding in a car with her parents and her boyfriend, probably talking about their wedding plans and dreaming about their future together, when suddenly a massive oil tanker truck came speeding toward them with broken brakes, unable to stop, and crashed. The sound was so loud it shook the ground like thunder, metal twisted and screamed, glass shattered everywhere like deadly rain, and fire spread across the road like an angry dragon. When the smoke cleared and the ambulance sirens finally stopped wailing, Adana was the only one still breathing. Her parents were gone, her boyfriend was gone, her dreams were gone, and her mind was so broken by the horror and sadness that it shattered into 1,000 pieces that could never be put back together the same way again. She woke up in a cold hospital bed with bandages covering her body, but the worst wounds were the ones nobody could see, the ones in her heart and mind that made her forget how to be the brilliant, happy woman she used to be. The doctors said her body would heal, but her brain had been damaged by the shock and grief so badly that she couldn't think straight anymore, couldn't remember things properly, and couldn't tell the difference between what was real and what was just the scary movies playing in her damaged mind. At first, her relatives tried to help her, taking turns watching her and hoping she would get better. But as months passed and she got worse instead of better, talking to dead people and crying for hours about things that went there, they slowly gave up on her, one by one, like she was a broken toy that couldn't be fixed. Soon, she was living on the streets, wearing dirty clothes that used to be beautiful, eating scraps from garbage cans, and sleeping wherever she could find a dry spot, while her once perfect hair became wild and tangled like a bird's nest, and her once bright eyes became cloudy and lost like she was looking at a world the rest of us couldn't see. The woman who used to solve complicated math problems in her head now spent her days arranging pebbles in strange patterns, having loud arguments with invisible enemies, and sometimes dancing to music only she could hear, which made people think she was completely crazy and dangerous. Years passed like this. 3 long, painful years where Adana lived like a ghost, haunting the streets of Port Harcourt, and people got so used to seeing her that she became part of the scenery like a broken street light or a pothole that everyone just learned to walk around. The market women at Marwa Market knew her face but treated her like she was already dead. The taxi drivers honked their horns to scare her away from their cars, and the police sometimes chased her with sticks when shop owners complained she was scaring away customers. But in this story of darkness and sadness, there was one man who saw something different when he looked at Adana, a young mechanic named David, whose hands were always dirty from fixing broken engines, but whose heart was cleaner than fresh rainwater. David worked in a tiny workshop that was really just a metal container near Garrison Junction, where he spent 12 hours every day fixing old cars and motorcycles for people who couldn't afford to go to fancy repair shops, earning just enough money to buy food and pay rent for his single room that was smaller than most people's closets. He wasn't tall or handsome or rich or famous. He was just a regular guy who noticed things other people missed, like how Adana's face sometimes looked intelligent when she wasn't talking to her invisible friends, or how she would gently touch broken flowers on the ground, like she was trying to heal them with her fingers. Every single day, when David took his lunch break, he would see Adana sitting somewhere nearby, sometimes mumbling to herself, sometimes just staring at nothing with the saddest eyes he had ever seen. And instead of laughing at her like everyone else did, he felt sorry for her, like she was a hurt animal that needed help. So David started doing something that seemed small but was actually huge. He began sharing his food with her, buying an extra bottle of cold water on hot days and leaving it where she could find it, or giving her half of his rice and stew even when he was so hungry his stomach felt like it was eating itself. He never asked her name, never tried to talk to her, because he could see she lived in a different world, but he made sure she knew that at least one person in the cross city cared whether she lived or died. His friends at the motor park thought he was wasting his money and called him foolish, saying things like, "David, why are you feeding that crazy woman? She doesn't even say thank you. Use that money to buy better clothes, or save up for a wife who can actually talk back to you." But David ignored them because something deep in his heart told him this was the right thing to do, even if he couldn't explain why. Then came the night that changed everything. A night when the rain fell from the sky like God was pouring buckets of water on the earth, turning the streets into rushing rivers and making everyone run for cover under shop roofs and bus stops. David was closing his workshop, putting his tools away, and getting ready to go home to his dry room when he saw Adana huddled under a thin piece of metal that wasn't protecting her from the rain at all. Shivering so hard, her whole body was shaking like a leaf in the wind, with water dripping from her hair and clothes and making puddles around her feet. In that moment, looking at this woman who had been through so much pain and was now suffering even more, David felt something powerful explode in his chest. Not just pity, but a burning anger at how unfair life could be, and a determination to do something about it that was stronger than any feeling he had ever experienced. Without thinking about what people would say or how it might look, David walked through the rain to where Adana was sitting, held out his big, rough hand that was used to fixing broken things, and said in a gentle voice, "Come with me. You can't stay here tonight." Adana looked up at him with eyes that seemed to see him clearly for the first time ever, and maybe because she was so cold and tired and miserable, or maybe because she recognized the kindness in his voice, she took his hand and let him lead her through the pouring rain to his small room behind the workshop. David's room wasn't much, just 4 walls, a bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a few cooking pots. But to Adana that night, It must have felt like a palace because it was warm and dry and safe. David gave her a clean wrapper to change into and heated up some gari with milk and sugar, watching as she ate slowly like she hadn't tasted real food in months, which was probably true. That night, with the rain drumming on the roof like a thousand tiny drums and the lightning flashing outside like camera bulbs, two of the loneliest people in Port Harcourt found comfort in each other's company, not because they were in love, but because they were both tired of being alone and scared and forgotten by the world. In a moment that was tender and desperate and beautiful and sad all at the same time, David and Adana came together like two broken pieces trying to make each other whole, creating something new in the darkness that neither of them planned or expected. When morning came and the rain stopped, Adana didn't leave. She stayed in David's room like a cat that had finally found a warm place to sleep, and David didn't ask her to go because he had grown tired of eating dinner alone and talking to himself. For weeks, they lived together in a strange, quiet partnership where David would go to work fixing engines and Adana would sit in the room, sometimes cleaning things, sometimes just staring out the window, sometimes disappearing for hours and coming back with flowers or stones or other treasures only she understood. Then one morning, everything changed again when Adana started throwing up, first just a little bit, then every morning like clockwork, and David realized with excitement and terror that the night of the big rain had planted a seed that was now growing inside her. When the neighborhood gossips found out that the mad woman was pregnant, the whispers spread faster than fire through dry grass. Who is the father? How could David be so stupid? That child will be cursed. They should both be ashamed. David's best friend Jeed cornered him at the workshop and said, "Brother, you have to think about your future. This woman is crazy, and now she's carrying a crazy baby. Send her back to the streets before this problem ruins your whole life." For days, David wrestled with doubt, like a man fighting an invisible enemy, wondering if his friends were right, wondering if he should have listened to his head instead of his heart, wondering what kind of future he could possibly build with a woman who talked to ghosts and a baby who might inherit her broken mind. But then one evening, as he sat watching Adana gently rub her growing belly and hum a lullaby to the child inside, David saw something that made his decision easy. He saw that becoming a mother was slowly bringing Adana back from the dark place where her mind had been hiding. The love she felt for her unborn baby was like medicine healing her wounded soul, and for the first time in years, when she looked at David, her eyes were clear and grateful and almost normal. That night, David knelt beside her, placed his rough mechanic's hand on her round belly, and made a promise that would change 3 lives forever. "I will not abandon you or this child. We will be a family, no matter what anyone says, no matter how hard it gets." 9 months later, in a small, crowded maternity clinic that smelled like disinfectant and hope, Adana gave birth to the most beautiful baby boy anyone had ever seen, a child with bright, curious eyes that seemed to see everything and a cry so strong it made all the nurses smile. As Adana held her son for the first time, something miraculous happened that the doctors couldn't explain and the nurses had never seen before. The fog that had clouded her mind for years suddenly lifted like morning mist disappearing in sunlight, and she spoke her first clear, intelligent words in over 3 years. "His name is Emeka, because God has done something wonderful." David, standing beside the bed with tears of joy running down his cheeks, knew that the scared, broken woman he had rescued from the rain was gone forever, replaced by a mother whose love had made her strong and smart and whole again. Raising baby Emeka was like trying to climb a mountain made of money problems. David worked from sunrise to sunset, fixing more cars and motorcycles than ever before. His hands cracked and bleeding from constantly working with metal and oil. Every naira he earned immediately spent on baby formula, diapers, and the tiny clothes that Emeka outgrew faster than weeds after rain. Adana, though much better than before, still had dark days when the ghosts of her dead family would visit her dreams and make her cry for hours. But her love for Emeka was stronger than her sadness, and slowly, like a flower growing through concrete, her brilliant mind began to remember all the things it used to know. She started teaching Emeka to read using old newspapers and magazines she found in the garbage, showing him how engines worked by drawing pictures with charcoal on the walls and explaining math problems using stones and bottle caps. Because even though they were poor, she was determined that her son would have the education she once had. From the time he could walk, everyone could see that Emeka was different from other children. While his friends played with sticks and empty cans, Emeka would disappear into David's workshop and spend hours building incredible machines from scraps of metal, old wires, and broken engine parts, creating toys that actually worked and inventions that made grown men scratch their heads in amazement. When Emeka was 5, he built a small radio from pieces of old electronics that could pick up stations from 3 different countries. When he was 7, he designed a water filter using sand, charcoal, and cloths that made dirty water clean enough to drink. And when he was 10, he created a solar-powered fan using a car battery, some mirrors, and parts from an old computer that kept their tiny room cool during the hottest days of the year. David would watch his son work with pride and worry fighting in his heart. Pride, because Emeka was clearly a genius who could probably become anything he wanted, and worry because David was just a poor mechanic who didn't know how to help a genius son reach his full potential in a world that seemed designed to keep poor children poor. Adana, now fully recovered and sharper than ever, became Emeka's first and best teacher, using her engineering knowledge to challenge his brilliant mind with harder and harder problems, and together they would spend hours discussing ideas that David couldn't understand but loved to listen to anyway, like watching 2 wizards cast spells with words instead of magic wands. The family's big break came from the most ordinary place imaginable, the sputtering smoking engines of the yellow tricycle taxis that filled Port Harcourt streets like busy ants. David had been watching these cakey drivers struggle for years, seeing how much money they spent on petrol and repairs, listening to them complain about how expensive it was to keep their vehicles running, and dreaming of a way to help them save money so they could feed their families better. For months, David had been sketching ideas in a notebook he kept hidden under his pillow, rough drawings of a solar panel system that could help power the keke engines and reduce their fuel costs. But his ideas remained just dreams because he didn't have the technical knowledge to make them real. One day, 16-year-old Emeka found his father's secret notebook and saw the sketches of solar panels and battery systems. And instead of seeing impossible dreams, he saw an engineering challenge that made his brain buzz with excitement like a computer booting up. Using knowledge he had taught himself from old textbooks found in garbage dumps and free internet videos watched on a cracked smartphone David had bought him for his birthday, Emeka spent the next 6 months working in secret, turning his father's simple idea into something revolutionary that could change not just how keke drivers work, but how all of Africa used energy. Working at night, by candlelight and during school breaks, using salvaged parts from the junkyard and electronic components he bought with money earned from helping neighbors fix their radios and phones. Emeka built a prototype that was so much better than his father's original idea that it seemed like magic. A lightweight, durable solar charging system that could power not just tricycle taxis, but houses, shops, schools, and entire villages that had never had electricity before. The night he finally finished his invention and demonstrated it for his parents, connecting it to a small battery and lighting up a bulb that glowed steady and bright. David and Adana stared in amazement like they were watching their son walk on water or turn stones into gold. Papa, Emeka said, his young voice filled with quiet confidence that reminded Adana of her own university days. This isn't just for KK drivers, this can bring light to every dark corner of Nigeria. This can power clinics so doctors can work at night, schools so children can study after sunset, and businesses so people can work longer and earn more money. Adana looked at the glowing bulb, then at her son, then at David, and in that moment, she saw the future spread out before them like a map of treasures. She saw their invention lighting up villages where children had never seen electric light, powering hospitals where babies were born in darkness, and giving hope to millions of people who had been forgotten by the government and ignored by the big power companies. When Emeka entered the solar power system in a national competition for young inventors, competing against children from expensive private schools who had fancy laboratories and wealthy parents, nobody expected the poor boy from Garrison Junction to win anything more than a participation certificate. But when the judges saw Emeka's invention working perfectly, powering multiple devices at once while other contestants' projects failed or broke down, and when they heard him explain his design with the confidence of a university professor and the passion of someone who truly understood the problems he was trying to solve, they knew they were looking at something extraordinary. Emeka didn't just win the competition, he won so convincingly that the judges asked him to present his invention to government officials and business leaders who could help turn his prototype into a real company. The prize money was more than David had earned in 5 years of fixing cars, but even more important was the attention from investors and tech companies who wanted to help Emeka build his dreams into reality. That was the beginning of Emeka Power, a company named after its brilliant young founder that would revolutionize how Africa thought about energy and prove that the best innovations often come from people who understand problems firsthand because they've lived with them every day. David became the company's head of practical operations. If you enjoyed this African folktale with valuable moral lessons, please subscribe to Sam Gold Tales. Give the video a thumbs up and drop a comment to share your thoughts. Your support encourages us to create more. Thank you for watching.